actually see about this. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to talk about some real important things about contracts, things that are going on right now. I know people will be joining us as we go. Maybe I should give them a moment. Did everybody get a chance to view the video I sent out from Margie Grant?
Yes.
It's a good video for sure, but I want to talk about the ins and outs of this specific addendum. So let's see how many folks. All right, well, we're gonna get started. I'm not sure how many people are here with us today, but we're gonna get going. Oh, hi, Jen.
Hi.
How are you?
Hey, Dexter.
Hi.
Good, how are you?
Good. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna get started. Anybody, this is I want this to be interactive because we're talking contracts, right? And contracts isn't like point and click, it's a conversation. So the first thing we're gonna look at is this COVID addendum. Why would we use it? When would we not use it? So let me move the people out of the way here. I'm gonna have to move to the bottom. All right, so we can see, everybody can see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So the point of this addendum is to allow for things, so force majeure, right? Could you say that this whole pandemic, for lack of a better word, could be covered under force majeure? It could, right? Because is it an act of God? Yeah, nobody else created the virus that we know of. so could it be covered under that? Probably. But does it really allow for the things that we're seeing? Not really, right? Because that's about like utilities that can't be functioning. Well, that's probably the last thing that would not function in a situation like now. You know, they're talking about essential businesses will constantly run. So the point of the force majeure is really for those essential businesses that can't run, which is the reason really that they came up with something specific like this addendum, because it's affecting different things, right? So one of the things, this can be used in two ways. It could be used if you're currently in a contract, and then when you're getting into a contract, you don't need to start with it except for one part. This over here, homeowners' condominium association approval. If, especially it's a condo, and that association requires that they approve the buyer, right? If you are putting in an offer on a condo that has the requirements that the association has to approve, I would start the contract with this addendum. Because the honest truth is, have you guys noticed that some of these HOAs are just not working, right? Mm-hmm. And that could be a real hindrance to the sale, and it has nothing to do with the buyer. So in that instance is probably the only time I would really start it, because most of these things are extensions. If you notice, the closing date is an extension. The financing period is an extension. So all of these things extend, except for the condominium. They are saying extending, but we want to start with that extension because we want to make it open-ended, right? So a lot of times the condo association and that condo doc will be very specific about the time frame that they have to reply about whether they're approved. Here we could put it to the closing date. Follow me? Because it's really not a place unless you put it under additional terms. So you could start with this one, but that is the only other time I would start with this one. This really is a addendum for when you're in contract and things are happening. Okay? So let's talk about the first one, closing date. So they're agreeing to extend the closing date because of various things that are happening. Now, be very careful when you're extending a closing date. If you are just saying, I'm extending a closing date on this, on a regular extension addendum, or even on a blank addendum where you say buyer and seller agreed to extend the closing date to such and such. Did you extend to anything else? Anybody? That Dexter's shaking his head. No, exactly. No. So that's the point. You guys can unmute yourself if you want so we can all talk. But you have to, if you are worried that we have to extend this closing date because we're not sure what's happening with financing, then you have to extend both financing period and closing date. Because simply by extending, hey Carrie, by extending the closing date, you're not extending the financing period, right? So what happens if they're not approved? Who else we got on here? 407. Hey, 407, not sure who you are, but hello. So with that said, if you don't extend the financing period, it doesn't close because of financing. You don't have financing extension. You understand me? That financing approval, that contingency is waived. Follow me? Any questions on that? So there's another thing in here, inspection period. Okay, so if you just want to increase the inspection period, again, not related to financing. These are breaking out very specific items. Secure title. So this situation with the title is not necessarily something we see often, but if you're dealing with especially vacant land, if you've got some kind of commercial situation, that would probably be the need, but we don't typically see the curing title period. Feasibility study, what is that for? Anybody, what contract would you use that with?
Land.
Yes, land and commercial. Okay, both of those would be requiring a feasibility study or due diligence. Now, the reason I say that is feasibility study and due diligence is per contract. And this addendum needs to be used properly per contract. So what does that mean? We're going to look over here really quickly in .loop, and I want you to see something. There are many different types of contracts written by attorneys that work with the Florida Realtors Association. Not just, so we all, and I'm a big fan of FAR/BAR, and that is the Florida Bar Association, right? So if we look under Florida Interactive Forms, that is a direct feed from Florida Realtors. That gets updated all the time by Florida Realtors. So if you ever want the most updated form, it's there. I say that with a small caveat. If you're looking for a FERPTA addendum, I have tried to get them to take out an old one and they have not. So we can't control this folder at all. But instead of having to go to Form Simplicity or Transaction Desk, you don't have to do that. Every form that would be there is here. Follow me? Questions? Okay. So let's say I wanted to look up a VA addendum. See, if I type VA, I have VA addendum. Let's go a little bit more. Nothing is coming up because you've got to be really careful that one thing, not only is it highlighted, but also that you're writing it the right way. So if I just said VA and I search, I'm getting vacant land, bars, but see how you have Veterans Housing Administration, Veterans Affairs. It doesn't say VA. You have to be very specific when you're searching this file. So I'm going to say whatever contract you're in, and we all use FAR/BARs and as is, which on the very second to last page, it tells us exactly the way the title of the addendum that would match this contract is worded, right? So FHA/VA financing, it does say Veterans Affairs, but you know that you have to start with FHA. Right? So that's why Federal Housing Administration. Now, if you hover over it, you see here how it says FAR/BAR. Can you guys all see that? Let me try to go in closer. It tells you what contract this comes from. It comes from the FAR/BAR. See FAR/BAR. Now, see this one? CRISP. CRISP is a different contract. CRISP is a weird contract, and one of the biggest differences, not only is the way that they look a little different, but the terms of the contracts are different. So who can tell me in a FAR/BAR or FAR/BAR, so residential or as is contract, written by Florida Realtors, BAR, who can tell me what the time of that contract is? Is it business days? Is it calendar days? Does it vary? Somebody.
Calendar days.
So if I say this will be, the money will be delivered within 3 days, is it business days? Is it calendar days? What is it?
I think CRISP is
Calendar.
business.
No, in the FAR/BAR, in the one we use.
Oh, that's calendar days.
Yes, and you would know that because if you go under timing in any contract, it'll tell you always, usually time is of the essence, but here it says calendar days shall be used in computing time periods. Time is of the essence, and if it lands on a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, extends to the next business day, right? Monday, or if Monday's a holiday, Tuesday, 5 p.m. But in a CRISP contract, it is business days if it's less than 5 days. So some of these, also vacant land is a little different in commercial. So when you're going to use something, you have to make sure that you're matching the addendum that you're using with the actual contract. Does that make sense? Any questions on that, guys? No. Love it. So back to the coronavirus. When we're talking about we'll extend this so many days, depending on if you're talking a CRISP or you're talking a vacant land contract, or you're talking a regular residential contract, it will be talking about either business days or calendar days. So be very careful the contract you're using this with, that you understand the timing. Or you could be really cool about it and just put the date. So my recommendation, especially during this craziness, and let's say you're the listing agent and someone gives you a crisp and you've accepted it, whatever the seller wanted it, make sure you're just putting a date so it's clear for everybody, so that people aren't going, well, that was business days. No, it was calendar days, right? So we don't want to get into that, especially during right now. So just for clarity, I personally would recommend putting an actual date here. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Excellent. Now, this is the part I really want to talk about. So let's say you have a buyer and you extended the closing, but you didn't extend the financing because they're already approved, right? They're good. They have their approval. We're expecting to close, but now because of XYZ, the closing date gets pushed off, right? So we've extended with this addenda. Now the lender comes back and says, we're not going to fund you. Okay, there are 3 banks in tiny little banks, but 3 little banks in Ocala that have said we're not funding anymore because they're little and they don't want to take the risk right now. Center State Bank is really strong. They're doing great. So if you're working with them, but always double check with the lenders that you're working with, because different lenders have different risk that they can assess, that they can still do business during that risk. So they need to know how liquid they are. So a lot has to do with the bank's liquidity, okay? So you wanna make sure when you're handling buyer or seller, you know what the lender, how they're doing in terms of, are they still funding? Are there issues with the loans? But let's say you only extended the closing period because you already are approved, and the loan, they say we can't fund anymore. Or they say instead of it being 3% that you were locked in at, it's now 6%. Can banks do that? Anybody?
Yes.
They sure can. I will tell you, during the crash in 2006 and 7 over there, I've seen FHA loans approved by the government pulled from the table. So things can happen like that. And this is why this little paragraph here is really good. All other non-conflicting terms of the contract remain in full force and effect. So that means anything else we've agreed upon is still good. We're not changing anything. We're only talking about changing whatever you're selecting here, right? But this is the part. If buyer has obtained approval for a loan and either the terms, conditions of the loan approval expire or the lender refuses to fund the loan due to COVID restrictions, the buyer may cancel the contract by providing written notice, always, right, within 2 days of the expiration. So either the earlier of, either before the closing date or within 2 days of the notice that they're not going to fund the loan, right? So if you get a notice, we're not going to fund this loan, and you sit on it for 5 days, you're not in compliance, right? Mm-hmm. So you got to be timely. So if you get a notice from the bank that says, we'll fund you, but it's at 6%, that's when you've got to notify in writing the seller, and this little phrase will go into effect. So that buyer is not going to lose their deposit, because it says buyer shall be refunded the deposit, thereby releasing buyer and seller from contract. Okay, this is important right now because, again, there's a lot of things changing. So let's say, here's one. You've got maybe it's an investment property that someone's purchasing and they're doing it with a portfolio loan. Well, that portfolio loan may change their requirements. They may change whether they want to fund. They may change the amount. They can change anything they want. Until a deal is closed, it's not closed, right? So this is why this is an important thing. So even if you've had approval, but you need to extend a closing date, at this time, I would not recommend, if you're representing a buyer, do not use a regular extension addendum. Use this one, because this will protect the buyer if in case something does happen on the lending side. Now, if you are representing the buyer and you need to extend and they have not been approved, the lender says, yeah, we're good, but you do not have a clear to close, you have not been approved, extend financing period. Extend it, because if we don't, even if we have it in writing, right? The problem is here it says if they have been obtained an approval. So if we have not obtained that approval yet, right, then this isn't going to help us. So we have to make sure that we either select financing period to extend that, or they have an approval and we just extend closing date. Are we clear? Any questions?
We're clear.
Jen, Carrie?
Yeah. I'm a little confused. So the financing period, so I know you said to use this addendum like as needed through the contract.
Yes.
So if we haven't been approved for the financing, just go ahead and extend it. That way the 2-day works in favor
So
for them.
let's put it this way. You have a deal started on the 1st,
Mm-hmm.
and you're supposed to close on the 31st.
Mm-hmm.
And your loan approval is up through the 30th.
Okay.
But you hear from the lender today. Today's the 25th,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, we're still working out some details. I would today do
Okay.
this extension,
Okay.
right? Because you want to be proactive right now.
Okay.
You want to say, listen, the lender's, still working some details out. We're going to need to extend the closing date and the financing period. If we can do it earlier, we will. But we're in a time of flux, and I think everybody realizes that.
Yeah. Okay.
But that is what I'm saying. What you don't want to do is it's now the 30th, and you go, oh my God, the financing is going to close today. And then you send this addendum, and the seller says, no. Now you have to make a decision. Do we cancel, or do we try to push forward?
Right.
Follow me?
Yeah. And how far out would you extend it?
That you have to talk to the lender.
Okay.
That's where the lender comes in. They're going to give you a good idea. And everybody's I have seen in all of my offices, everybody, buyers and sellers, have been very fluid and working together, trying to make things happen. So no one's trying to use this to pull a wool over anyone's eyes, right? We all know what it's here for. But the point is that there is some uncertainty, especially in the lending side. And so this is really crucial that you use this properly. If you just said, send out the closing date, but they weren't in approval, then this really doesn't protect their deposit.
Right.
Okay. Everybody clear on that?
Yep.
All right. So that's the coronavirus addendum, which I think is a fabulous thing to look at. There's a couple other things I want us to look at, which are really crucial right now. Have all of you taken a contract class with me?
Yes.
Everybody has? Anybody not taken a contract class with me here? I'm not sure.
No, I haven't taken classes with you.
Oh, Luce. Okay, my friend. Okay.
I haven't either.
Awesome. Well, we will go over a couple things just to catch you up that I think are important that we're paying attention to. But I really want to focus today because it's an hour, and let's be honest, to do contracts in hours, like impossible. I wanted to focus today on addendums, the COVID addendum especially, and the financing contingency. It's very important. So I want us to look at those. But right now, I do also want to talk about a couple things within the contract. Number one, I'm still seeing sometimes people give me contracts under personal property they're writing per MLS. So those of you who have not taken a class with me, if somebody writes over here per MLS, does that mean anything? Let me give you a scenario before you answer. Here's the scenario. You have a listing. We're representing list side. In the listing, we said washer and dryer included. We receive a contract that just says per MLS. During the listing period, this is a true story, by the way, washer and dryer gets stolen. We notify buyers that the washer and dryer have been stolen. They say you have to replace it. Here's the question, do we?
Yes.
Who says that? Joan?
That was me.
Who else? What else? Who else thinks we have to give them washer dryer?
I would say yes.
Okay, Dexter, what do you think?
No.
Carrie?
I'd say no.
Carolyn?
I'd say no.
Maria?
Sorry, I missed the question. I know you said about wash it and dryer disappeared, but it got stolen, but I didn't know before.
Over here on the contract, line 20, we wrote per MLS, not us, we represent list. Buyer side wrote per MLS, okay? Now we tell them the washer and dryer has been stolen, and they say we have to replace it. Janine Ortiz, do we, my friend?
Whoa.
How about Kim Mancini? I love that she's on here. Hi, Kim.
Hi. I would say yes.
Ooh. Well, I
No.
hate to tell you, the no's win.
Oh,
Because per MLS means nothing. per MLS. If you look at an MLS sheet, any MLS on the bottom of it says this information cannot be relied upon, blah, 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 legal terminology, because it's simply a portal for us to share information. And how many times is the MLS wrong? Like all the time. So per MLS means nothing, except there is one instance where it would count. Does anybody know? If you've taken my class, you know. Nobody? Somebody out there knows, you just don't want to be a no. If you, on the back of the page, checked the box other, you
Homeowner
wrote
association.
MLS broker synopsis or MLS synopsis, and you had it initialed. You have now incorporated that MLS sheet, that offer has been now incorporated into the contract. So you can't just check the box and write it. You have to check the box, write it, and have it initialed so everybody has seen it and knows it's incorporated. Follow me?
Can you repeat what it should say if you check other?
Yeah, MLS, whatever you're printing. So MLS, if it's a broker synopsis, I wouldn't do broker synopsis. I don't need to see the commission. I would just do
Yeah.
MLS synopsis, you know, whatever. Okay. So, but that is the only time that would count. So, because if you read this, and it's very crucial, we all understand what is included here. This paragraph, D, personal property, when you're in a listing presentation, you better know these items. And if you don't, have this page with you, because you need to go through all of these things with the sellers and make sure they're willing to convey all these things. One of the things I'll see, window treatments. That's a crazy one. Blinds. Drapery rods and draperies. I have shared this story, but we almost lost a contract because of Target curtains. Target curtains. They were from Target, and they were hung in the house. And the sellers took them when they flew out of town. The buyers had to walk there, and they said, "We're not closing. Where are the blinds? Where's the curtains?" Really? I mean, they're like $30. But anyway, we shipped them back. I mean, it was ridiculous because it states here, unless we write down here, blinds and curtains not conveying, it's coming. Now, here's another question in regards to this. You're at a house and they have a, what is the doorknob thing? You know, the one when they can see you at the doorknob?
Oh, like the Ring doorbell or something?
Ring. Thank you. I couldn't think of it. What if there's a ring? We're representing the buyer. I don't write ring here. I don't write per MLS. It says nothing about ring in the MLS anyway. Is that Ring doorbell going to be there at closing? Anybody?
Yes.
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 Why?
Not attached.
Because it's attached.
Not attached. It's
It's not
Oh,
attached.
then, no, it wouldn't be there.
Exactly. So this is where we get into a question of what is an attachment, right? Because if it's attached, it's supposed to convey. Okay, that makes sense. Here's a story. We're representing buyer. We go into this beautiful home and it's gorgeous. It's empty, but they still have a big kind of like armoire piece, and above it this ginormous fish. So the buyer is assuming that's going to be going, they just haven't finished moving. Well, they go to do their walkthrough, and guess what's still there? That ginormous armoire and the freaking fish. And they said, we don't want that fish. Why is it still here? And they said it's an attachment. So we had to fight what the definition of attachment was. And there's 3 different definitions. So what it ended up coming down to is if the removal of such does not damage, for example, because they had placed that armoire thing in front of the wall, even though they had screws, so that's where they were saying it was attached, but if you remove the screws, so it wouldn't fall, right? It did not ruin the baseboard. But if it had ruined the baseboard, it could be considered an attachment because it was placed into the wall. Follow me?
Wow.
So we actually won that one, but that was like so don't leave anything to chance. If there's a fish on the wall, you say, are you trying to convey that fish? Like, you need to know. That needs to go in here, right? You need, also another big one that comes up, video surveillance equipment. Is it an attachment or isn't it? Anybody?
It's not. It's not.
It's easily removable. Now, could there be some that are built into the wall? Well, if it's built into the wall, if it actually affected the sheetrock, then it's an attachment. So my suggestion, especially as we have, for example, you're at a pool and the pool has those rock speakers. Is that okay?
No.
Unless we say it does. Here's another one. We go into a home, they have a gorgeous chandelier in the lobby. Is that coming?
No.
Well,
You Yes. You
Well,
have to,
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
where we get
You have-
weird,
You
right?
you have to exclude it and then replace it with a light fixture.
Yeah, because it says light fixtures. So where we would really get in trouble is if we show it in our pictures in the MLS, and when people come see it, they see it with the chandelier. And then they come to walk through and we've replaced it with some little light. See, they could say that it's been deceptive because we displayed it and they saw it with another light fixture. So that could be construed as deceptive. So in that instance, if they say we're not going to convey the chandelier, have them take it out. Don't just say excluded, because let's say you said excluded in the MLS and you forgot to write it here. You missed it. It didn't say the chandelier in the lobby will not convey, right? Didn't say that, foyer, whatever. Is it coming?
Yes.
Probably. Probably. So it's really crucial that when you're on a listing appointment, you know all of these things. The one normal thing that's not written here is the washer and dryer, which I used that example already. And the things that you don't think about are really a lot of the technology stuff that we have out there today. And they're all, you know how many people want to buy a house because it has the ring and it has a nest, okay? That nest system, right? Is that considered coming? Could they change that system out?
yes.
Right? So this is where we want to be very specific with our sellers and specific with our buyers. And when we receive the contracts, make sure they're actually written out here very, very clearly. One more question here. Let's say you're selling a home and there's going to be furniture included. What do we do? Anybody?
Make a list
Make a list. I like it.
An addendum to it.
with the price.
I would put it on an addendum.
The
Make
problem
sure you
with
state.
addendum is with the financial. If you have an addendum, so they have to bring an appraisal for the furniture. So I wouldn't do an addendum.
No, put it on the addendum. Do not, I would, in my opinion, do not give it to the lender. Put it on the addendum and say the following items are conveying at no additional value, and you list them. We do it all the time. But if you put anything about a value, okay, or you don't say that they're not conveying at value, they're assuming that part of that purchase price is for the furniture, right? And then we as a brokerage could get in trouble for actually not collecting because we're getting commission based off of that price, right? But if there's chattel or property being included in the sale, we have to collect sales tax.
Yeah.
So that's a really ugly one. So never, 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 ever. If you're going to put anything, a sofa is being included, or a whole room of furniture, be very specific, exactly what it is, where they're located, and that they're being conveyed at no additional value. And on a separate addendum, and don't give it to the lender. Questions?
Nope.
Okay. So we already talked about this. Okay, never a company offer. Why would we ever want to give a deposit at a company's offer? I'm going to say another thing. Everybody here knows, because we've been talking about it, that we're being audited by DBPR, and they don't seem to care about COVID. They're just having fun with their audit, so it's fabulous. So I am really focused on compliance, compliance, compliance. So anybody tell me what, right here on this page I'm showing, there's a huge violation that occurs often on this page. Anybody share with me what that violation could be?
Not filling out the escrow agent.
Thank you. Yes, it is imperative. June, if you wrote TBD by seller, but when the time that thing gets executed, you need to go in that contract or add it to an addendum, but it needs to be there because it is crucial. The buyer knows who holds their money and how to get it. And I would say put as much information here as you can. If you don't know their address, look it up online. Okay, guys, because we will definitely get huge violations if this is not filled in. That is a huge one. Another thing is if everything is not initialed and signed properly, that is a violation. We're supposed to make sure that it's fully executed. So if you have me coming after you about a stupid initial, that's why. Okay, so we're clear on that. So always do that. Now, see here, there are many times, if left blank, I'm on line 29, then 3 days after the effective date is when the deposit's due, right? don't leave if left blank. Put a date in here, and I'm going to tell you why. Let's say this offer is accepted and executed. Okay, so we get an offer signed by, we put an offer in on Wednesday, the 1st. Okay, Thursday, the 2nd, the sellers sign it. I am the buyer's agent. I get it back in my inbox at Thursday at 11:59, but I don't see it till Friday at 7 a.m. What is the effective date of that contract?
Thursday.
Friday.
Who said Friday?
I'm afraid to tell you.
It's Thursday.
It's Joan. Okay. It is when it has to be signed and delivered. It doesn't matter when it was viewed. Viewed is not part of the conversation. So if it came into your inbox on Thursday at 11:59, the effective date of that contract is Thursday.
What
So
about,
what was that?
what about, because yeah, we all assume, okay, they have it, but what about if it went to spam or something? I mean, I always
Doesn't matter.
information.
It doesn't matter. We delivered it. As our part, as the listing side, we signed it and we delivered it. It's not up to us to make sure you found it. Okay? That is up to the agent to do that. But it has been delivered. So in terms of an effective date, it is when it shows up, even if it's in spam. Now, I would recommend, as soon as you're in contract, buy or sell side, I would send out, hey, I'm super excited, we're in contract, and such is the effective date, because everything we do in this contract is based off of that particular date. So if one person's thinking it's Thursday and another person's thinking it's Friday, this is where we get into a lot of problems. I've seen so many issues that could have been avoided if everybody's on the same page with what the effective date was. Everybody clear on that?
Yeah. Carrie, can I ask you a quick question? It happens to me in the past, but I always get everything signed again. Like if you put an end line, you said, okay, come back, answer by tomorrow at 5, let's say, or at 12, whatever, the PM. But then you get it the day after, signed. You place an offer and then the seller doesn't sign it until the day after, you put the deadline. I usually get everything signed again by the buyer, just in case, just to make it legal. Because
so here, to answer your question, Maria, I completely appreciate what you're saying. So line 45 is what you're talking about. So a lot of people might say this is due tomorrow by 5 p.m. So Friday, 5 p.m. To try to get the seller, right, to make a decision, because they're trying to get a better offer usually, right? Or try to somehow make their offer seem more appealing. Unfortunately, we are in a situation oftentimes where we get the listing agents, if they even contact us back, who say, well, they're going to be reviewing contracts on Saturday or Sunday. Let's say Sunday. You're 100% right. My contract is now null and void. So you have to resubmit a new offer with that date. Now, if it comes back and it's executed and it wasn't executed by that date, do you really need to do a new one? No, because now it's an executed contract. But the reality is it bad that you did? No. I mean, it's not a bad thing. What I'd be more concerned of is if you have an offer out there and you still haven't heard back, the offer truly is null and void, right? So you could look at it as when they're signing it and sending back, it's a counter. Okay? Here's a question for you. I have a contract completely executed. So the buyer's agent sent it to us. The seller signed everything, but they changed one thing. They wrote under, where am I? 183. It's line 183. Oops, 183. Where's 183? Okay, you see this? Seller shall pay installments due prior to closing, and buyer shall pay installments due after closing. Or seller shall pay installments in full, assessments in full prior to the time of closing. The reality is, the way I look at this, if there are assessments, we should all know about it. But if I'm representing buyer, of course I'd prefer to have A, right? I mean, B rather. I want the seller to pay everything because if I don't know about something, I want to make sure it's paid for. If I'm representing the seller, of course, I'd rather have it to say A, right? Because then if there is something, the buyer has to pay for it. But the reality is we should have known if there was assessments because they're talking about exactly the type of assessments they are here. So we should really have known if they're not talking about you know, they're really, like they could say here, at closing, seller shall pay the full amount of liens imposed by a body. So that could be they're extending the road and they're charging the community. The amount of the public body's most recent estimate for this improvement should be substantially completed by this effective date and has not been result of a lien. Okay, so this is what they're talking about. They're not really talking about assessments from the association or anything like that. But still, we want to be clear. I would tell you, it does not include homeowners association. Case, what if they received, maybe they don't live there, right? And maybe they received a letter from the county saying, we're going to widen your road and XYZ, and you have to pay an installment. If we didn't protect our buyer and select B, who would have to pay for it? Buyer, right? So this is why I would say if I'm representing buy side, I like B. If I'm representing sell side, I like A, okay? However, back to my original, I have an offer come in. Seller signs everything. The one thing they do is they say, well, we don't like B. So we cross it out, we sign A, and we initial. Do we have an executed contract?
No.
Who? Who says no?
No,
Luz.
Who
No,
says yes?
no, we don't have an executed contract.
Does anybody think we do?
No, because you still got to get the buyers to initial the change.
And if you thought we did, you wouldn't say it anyway, because you know you guys are pretty strong, so that's good. Yes, it is a counter offer. Until this is initialed, this is a counter, right? So can the buyers at that time say we don't want to make an offer anymore?
Yes, they can.
Yeah.
They can. So we have to be very careful. No matter how small a change we make, it becomes a counter. Now, everybody's agreed, but we filled in the title company's information. Is it a counter?
I'm sorry, can you say it again?
So similar scenario, but we've all agreed. Everybody signed this contract. But now, because we had TBD by seller, we're filling in the title company information. Is it a counter offer?
No.
No, it could be
It
included.
will get,
in the addendum.
It is not. It's a clarification of terms already agreed upon, right? So we have to be very careful. Usually we make any change in a contract, we want it initialed by everybody, right? Because it's a counter. We're changing terms. But when we're adding information, so you could always add it to an addendum and have everybody sign it. But again, it's crucial that everybody knows who's holding the money. So that's the point. But it doesn't actually become a counter in that instance. Anybody have anything to say on that?
Yeah,
Irina, hello.
if the seller cared
Hi, guys.
who the title was, it would have been in the MLS, or they would have added it to the counter, correct? If it said TBD.
So I would love to say that all listing agents would put the title information in there, or I would really love to say that all sellers, listing agents would actually answer the phone. But oftentimes it's in those instances where they didn't put it in the MLS and they don't answer the phone that we write TBD by seller. But they have to tell us where to send the escrow, right? Because otherwise, where are we sending it? So whenever they give it to us, we should be either adding it here or putting it on an addendum.
So do they both have to initial it still then?
You really want the buyers, right? Because the sellers know they're the
Right
ones.
now, yeah.
I mean, unless it's converse and it's the sellers that have the buyers that have elected who the escrow company is, right? In that case, they would have to agree to that, correct? So in that same instance, let's say we had a contract came in, we didn't know who, for example, they had, but we said we want to hold our own escrow, right? So we put our own title company in here, right? We put a title company in here. But then under who pays for what, let's get to that. Here we go. Seller shall designate closing agent and pay. We elect that one. Don't think this doesn't happen. I've seen this a bunch of times. It really cracks me up. What are they trying to do? They're trying to designate who the closing agent is and have the seller pay for the policy. But this does not, just by checking that, allow for that, does it? Because they're saying they shall designate it and we wrote in our title company. So when you are representing the seller and you were to receive something like that, we have to make a change because we have a conflict in our contract. So either in this case, we change the information up here and get everybody to sign it, right? We cross theirs out, put it in, or do it on any front page, whatever you want, and get everybody to sign it, because that is changing the terms of the contract, right? Who is holding the money and who is paying for what. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
That in that case, they would all need to sign it because we're now changing the terms of the contract. Okay. Closing date. Gosh, I still see this. It kills me. Do we ever write on, well, now you know because I just said it kills me. So clearly I can just not ask that question anymore. But on or before, what is the problem? Kim Mancini, my attorney from New York, my friend, what is the problem with on or before? Oh, I put you on the spot. Okay.
Well, so the only problem with that is in New York we do on or before. So
Oh my God, you do? Okay.
yeah, but
Well, I'm glad we're talking about this. In the state of Florida, we don't.
right. No, I know
the
that.
attorneys here are super specific, and their response to this is always, if it doesn't have a specific date, we don't have an effective contract because we don't know the closing date. So we never write on or before because they don't assume it to be a real effective contract. And I get it. And the idea is we're trying to make, because you know the difference is, Kim, in New York, attorneys are handling all the contracts, they're closing the deals.
Right.
So they're very clear what the information is. In the state of Florida, you have realtors who are not attorneys writing contracts and handling a lot of this stuff that typically would be handled by an attorney. And then we have closing agents who are not attorneys handling the paperwork. So that is why they don't want there to be any gray. They want everything to be extremely clear because as realtors, we are not allowed to write a contract. We are not allowed to write an addendum, right guys? Can we write an addendum?
No.
No, we can only scribe. We can only write buyer and seller agree because we're just writing down what they agreed upon. But if we write, this contract is contingent upon da 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 da, who is playing attorney? Which,
Yeah.
by the way, is a third-degree felony in our state. Not super good. So I'm going to suggest if you ever scribe an addendum, it always starts with buyer and seller agree because we are not attorneys. And that is why here you must say on whatever date. So my recommendation, if you think this is a VA loan and they tell you it's going to close in 30 days, maybe, and you have a sinking suspicion it's probably going to be more like 45, I'm going to write 45 days here. And I'm going to have communication with the listing agent, say, listen, we wrote 45 days of closing just to make sure the VA loan is good to go. But if it can be done earlier, we'd love to close earlier, right? Always, always, always go further out here because what I see happen often, it used to happen more worse beforehand where people were trying to make this offer so competitive. So they put the smallest closing date they could possibly squeeze in there. I've seen 15 days. I'm like, really? I'm going to close that loan in 15 days? Maybe it's cash, right? Well, they'll put a date in here that's really not possible. Everybody agrees to it. And then at the end, they ask for the extension. And the seller says, no. What happens? The buyer loses their money? It happens a lot. So if you're representing the buyer, be very cautious here that you don't underestimate, overestimate. You can always ask everybody if they want to close earlier. A lot of times the title company will request an addendum because just to know that everybody agrees to that date, but you really aren't changing the contract terribly because you're within the contract time. Does that make sense? If you're going beyond the contract time, you have to have an addendum. Clear? Everybody good?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Questions on anything thus far? Here's another fun one that I've seen a couple times. Subject to a lease. You have a situation where, I have one right now. They have people renting. They go into contract, say the 1st. They're supposed to close the 31st, but the renters are supposed to be out April 5th, let's say. Is this subject to a lease? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Anybody think it's not subject to a lease? Okay, excellent. Everybody's brilliant, and I love that. So it is definitely subject to a lease. So you must check subject to a lease, and notice the time frame here. You better have a written lease. So I have seen many times, especially working with investors, when we're getting a listing, there is a lease in place, and we say, okay, we need a copy of the lease. And they say, oh, we don't have them. They've been renting for us for years. They're good. Is that okay?
No.
They need to get one because within 5 days of the effective date of the contract, we need to give that lease to the seller, to the buyers, to make sure they feel comfortable with that lease, because this whole thing is contingent on them agreeing to that lease. That lease supersedes their own rights to this property, right? So they have to agree. They have 5 days themselves to agree whether or not they want to cancel the contract or continue. So it is imperative. Anybody who has that situation, I'm going to tell you, go to evict.com. Harry Heist is fabulous. For $50, you can draw up a lease. We're not doing it. The attorneys are doing it. And if God forbid he has to evict, you get a discount. Yay. So that's
I have a question for you, Carrie.
sure.
If you have a buyer that is buying a duplex
Mm-hmm.
to keep the tenants,
Uh-huh.
so that I has to check that box?
Yeah. There's
Okay.
tenants in there. Yeah. So
But
it's
they-
subject to a lease, and it could be subject to 2 leases, right? Because there's 2.
Okay,
Now-
but they want to keep but the new buyer wants to keep the tenant. So I have to-
Absolutely, but it's still subject to the lease, because they have to agree to the lease that's in place. They can't change it, right? They can't say, you were paying $1,800 a month, now you're going to go to $2,400 a month. They cannot do that until that lease expires, right?
yeah, correct. Okay.
So that's why it's subject to a lease, because the terms that have been agreed upon between tenant and landlord will remain beyond the sale. And so if they're not okay with those terms, they need to be able to get out of the contract, right? Questions on that? Nope. Sweet. All right. Anybody who's not taken my class, if you've taken my class, you're not allowed to speak. Under assignability, which one do we usually check and why?
May not assign.
May need a sign.
Why? This
Well,
might be a problem.
I always, I don't want them, because what happens if they can't, they're not buying the house themselves. They're trying to assign it, like those wholesalers. They always try to assign the contract to somebody else and resell it to somebody. I just rather deal with,
Okay, so
someone
let's say you have a situation where you're representing a buyer and it's the Smith family, super sweet little old lady, and you wrote it in Miss Smith's name and you said may not assign. And then she's like, okay, Carrie, I'm ready to put this in my family trust. Can you do that?
No.
Because it's not assignable. She has to close in a little Miss Smith's name, and then she has to pay to re-record it in the name of the trust. So you always want to ask, are you going to be holding the title in your personal name, or are you going to be putting it maybe in a family trust or an LLC? Because if that's the case, you need to say may assign. Now, I would suggest highly may assign, but not be released from liability, because agents freak out with the assignment, and you want to explain to them the reason we're making this assignable is because they're going to put it in a family trust or an LLC. Obviously, if it's an investment property, people are used to that. Now, to your point, Jean, of wholesaling, that's what this one's about. May assign and thereby be released from liability under this contract. We used to use that actually in Baldwin Park, believe it or not, when we sold condos there, because it was investor permitted and it was a build out that took time, right? So people would buy the contract with us, Centerline Homes. So it was Dexter and Centerline, but he had checked, may assign and thereby be released. Of course, it was a builder contract, it was different, but let's say. And then we had a price increase, 20 grand. And Dexter's like, woohoo, I'm going to take my money and run. He sells his contract to Jen. Jen now paid him the extra 20, and Jen comes into contract with us for the original contract. That can happen because we elected may assign and thereby be released. Follow me? We at Premier Sotheby's really do not do wholesaling. That's not like our cup of tea for sure. But, if and when, and who knows today, right? There could be a time where builders will be doing this again with the increase, and you have price increases every month or whatever. That would be an interesting thing. You know where else this was really popular? Anybody know a situation in the west side of town that was used a lot? Anybody? Bella Colina. When they sold those lots, people sold them over and over and over again because you had to build within 2 years or sell. So there are people who made $1 million off the sale of that lot because they bought them under a tent for $250,000, and then it kept going up and up and up because Ginn did a fabulous job in creating the sizzle. And then if you were the last one holding the bag, so sorry, so sad, didn't work out so well for you, but a lot of people made money with that. So this is that may assign and thereby be released, but I really have not seen that in many years. Questions? You guys have no questions? Carrie? Jan?
I knew you were gonna say that.
That's because I can see your faces. Everybody else, I can't see their face. And Dexter, I can see his. Okay, let's get into the bulk of what I want to talk about too, financing. So this is really important, especially now. I just saw this the other day. Let's say we get a contract in, and the contract on the front page says 500,000. They say they're going to put down 5,000. They say under financing that they're going to put down 80%. And then what do they write under a line 41? Anybody? Let's think about it. So
Balance.
what do they write?
Balance.
Never. I love you, Luce. Never, never, never. You see here, there's a $sign. That tells us we got to write a number there. Number 2, it says balance to close. It's already asking for that. So we can't write the same thing. Like if somebody says you have a question, you answer question. I mean, that doesn't make sense, right? So you have to actually write a number. And the reason for this is for clarity. So let's talk about that real quick. $500,000, right? 80%, they're going to put down 20%. So that is how much?
100,000?
100 grand. Okay.
Right.
Simple math. We are putting down 5,000. So we're subtracting now, right? So what should the balance be?
For
95,000.
395.
95,000. Because
Okay.
500,000 minus 400,000 minus 5,000. So you just got to subtract 500 minus 5,000 minus 400,000 equals 95,000, right? This should all add up. So if you add these things up, they should equal the top. If you start from the top and you subtract whatever you are left with, that's the balance. So I'm going to do this just in case. I've done this before, but for those who haven't joined me, we have a VA loan. The house is 500,000. We're putting down 5,000, keeping the numbers the same. Under financing, it's 100%. What do we write under the balance line?
500.
0?
You're right.
Minus the deposit, negative.
0. Yeah.
So Carolyn, ding, 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 the winner.
Oh, yay.
If you write 500,000, you already said that you're paying 500,000 for the loan. So you're going to pay $1 million for that property. That's a lot of money. That seller did fabulous, right? If you write 0, it's 100% financing. So if I have 500, right, minus 5,000, minus 500,000, what do I get? Negative 5,000. You have to put that, otherwise they're not getting 100% financing, which is why I'm going to suggest, instead of putting a percentage there, which you can, the percentage works, but put a dollar amount, because it'll make this last number that much easier. You can always add the numbers to make sure that all of these equal the top number. And if you took the top number and subtracted them all, they would equal the balance. Everybody clear on that?
Yes, thank you.
The only other time USDA would also be a situation, any 100% financing, you would have to give them back their deposit here. Otherwise, they're not getting 100% financing. Question, what about closing costs? It does not have anything to do with the front page. It tells you right here, not including buyer's closing costs, prepaids, or prorations. This is only regarding the purchase, okay? That was a trick question. You guys, come on, have a cup of coffee. Okay. Back to financing. Here we are. So we had that scenario where they put 500,000, they put 80%, and they put 95,000. I love it. It adds up. It's so beautiful. Okay. Then we go over here. By the way, I usually check that to make sure it adds up. And they selected A, and conventional, conventional and fixed, and 5% and 30 years.
Why they select A?
Yeah, this is happening. Happened a lot. Do we have a financial contingency?
No, because they're paying in cash. You select A.
Anybody else think we have a financing contingency?
No.
No, we don't. Because it does say very clearly here that buyer acknowledges that any terms and conditions imposed by the buyer's lender, if they're going to get a loan, does not affect or extend the buyer's obligation to close. So they can get a loan, but there's no financing contingency if they decide to obtain a loan. So that would just tell me, thank you for sharing that they're thinking of getting a loan, but you're making this contingent. Now, if I saw an A here, but then I saw, or what if this one, this I get a lot, God, I hate it. 500,000, 5,000, balance to close, 495, okay? Then they come over here and they check B, and conventional, and 30 days, and they fill everything in. What is it? Is it cash? Is it conventional? I mean, is it financing? Anybody? No answers. No results.
Financing.
You know what? It's nothing. We don't know. And that's the problem with it. That's where the clarity. So if we get a contract like that, that should never come to me. That should go right back to the listing agent, the buyer's agent, and say, what is it? Is it cash or is it financing? Because a lot of times what happens is agents will share it with the seller, only looking at the front page thinking, oh, this is fabulous. It's a cash deal. But then we find out it's not a cash deal. They made it contingent on financing. So no, the front page has to match. I don't think people do it on purpose. I think they just have a lack of knowledge. I'd like to think that, but be very careful that the front page matches the financing contingency, okay? One more scenario. Same scenario, 500,000, they rate 80,000, that same thing, right? But they come down here into financing and they check conventional and they check 30 days and they check fixed and they do 5% and they do 30 years, but they never checked B. Do we have a financing contingency?
No.
Anybody think we do? Anybody too scared to tell me?
I'd say no.
Carrie, what do you think?
I think no. I mean, I can't see the contract. I don't know. It's not coming up on ours. I'm not sure why, but.
Can everybody look at the contract?
Yeah. I think
Yes.
Oh, okay. It must be ours then.
You know what? Are you in a Mac?
Yeah.
3 finger up. Try to see if we get to a different screen. Okay, so the situation is no, you don't have a contingency because you never made it contingent by electing B. So we're on the list side and we get an offer like that. Is it our job to go back to the buyer's agent and say you forgot to check B?
No. Oh, yes.
Anybody think it is?
I mean, it's not,
No.
you have to, but if you want to move forward, I would.
Would be ethical. I don't know. I would do it.
Who are you representing?
The same.
Now, we are transaction brokers, so we do, in your sense, want to make this work. But is it our job to do their job?
No.
Now, if the front and the second page don't match, we have to go back because there's not clarity in this contract. But if this could protect our seller, should we really be going back?
She said fingers like
Right?
in a different screen.
Jen, you're probably on a different screen. You probably want to go to a different desktop. Okay.
Yeah, I don't. Okay. Yeah.
Any questions on that, guys? Now, oh God, do I see this all the time and it kills me. Yeah. At an interest rate, I'm on line 89. At an interest rate not to exceed, you see there's a percentage here? And then it says, if left blank, prevailing rate. You know what I see in here all the time? Prevailing.
Got it.
Why would you write prevailing? It says prevailing and it defeats the purpose. So let me share with you the purpose of this particular thing. We had a listing, no, we had a buyer. The buyer was approved, we were looking great. It was supposed to be like 5.5%. Well, she had done a bankruptcy years before, and there was a foreclosure in that bankruptcy. Well, it turned out, and I don't know why it took so long for them to find this, but they never filed the bankruptcy of the foreclosure at the time the bankruptcy closed. It took a couple of years later for them to actually file for the foreclosure papers, and therefore she was still within the 7-year period. So what happened was she was still able to get a loan, but she could now only get a loan at 12%. But we had written in 6%. Now, because we wrote that, we were able to get out of the loan. Because if we did not, She's still getting the prevailing rate based on her creditworthiness, which was a surprise to everybody, right? So this is why we fill in every line, right? We want to make sure we're filling in every line here. Make it clear with everybody? Okay, what if we don't know if they're going to go FHA or conventional? What do we check? What do we make a contingent on?
You gonna check both?
Well, wouldn't that be on the pre-approval?
You're so smart, Joan. It has to be on the pre-approval because if any decent listing agent receives it and you say it's contingent on FHA and you show me conventional pre-approval, I'm going to be like, what? Right? So yeah, if you want to send 2 pre-approvals, conventional and FHA, I don't know any listing agent who would really want to accept that, to be honest. I mean, I want to make a contingent on 1, right? Like this is not for fun here. So at this point, the question is, we are thinking of going FHA, but we know we can go conventional. You're representing buyer. Which do you make the contract contingent on?
Finance.
Which one though, conventional or FHA? Anybody?
FHA probably just to cover the basis.
It's easier to combine to. It's gonna be easier to change it to FHA to conventional instead of conventional to FHA. I will work
100%. So go with the more difficult to change. So if you make it contingent on FHA and they don't get approved on FHA, can you go back to the listing agent and say, I'd like to change the financing contingency to cover conventional? Can you do that?
Yeah.
Absolutely, yes.
9 out of 10 times, a listing agent is going to be like, sure, yeah, that's okay. I can do that, right? But if you're conventional and then you go to the listing agent and you say, we want to change the financing contingency to cover FHA, how many times are going to be like, yeah, sure?
No.
No way. It's not going to happen. So what if you didn't tell them? And you made it conventional here, but you tried to change to FHA. They got denied FHA. So you try to cancel this contract with a denial for FHA. Do they get their money back?
Negative.
They sure don't, because it was only conventional. It was only contingent on conventional. And I did see a scenario which was really stupid, but it went to a escrow disbursement order with DBPR. It was a similar situation, and guess what? They lost their money because it was only contingent on conventional. They would have had to not only notify us in writing, but get a new financing contingency agreed upon by buyer and seller that they're making the contract contingent on FHA. Good? All right. Now, buyer shall make loan application within 5 days. That one's all good, but this is important. So we need to make sure buyer's failure to use diligent effort to obtain a loan during loan approval period shall be considered default under the terms of this contract. And then they go on to tell you what diligent effort is. So it's not limited to, but it concerns timely furnishing all documents, information, paying fees and charges requested by buyer's mortgage broker and lender in connection with the buyer's mortgage loan application. So I had a situation where we represented the seller. It was a real mess. Kim, you know this deal. And it turned out that these people who saw the home with Kim, but then put in an offer themselves because they were realtors, not realtors, licensed agents. Then they went ahead and tried to cancel the contract on not being approved for a loan. Unfortunately, they were not approved for the loan because they'd never supplied their documents.
Oh.
So the lender has to say why they're denied the loan. And the denial stated because they did not finish their application by providing such and such documents. So therefore, did they use diligent effort?
No.
Do they get the deposit back?
No.
Wasn't that fun to tell them? So,
I think Kim enjoyed it.
your contract. Now, if you're on the buy side and you got these buyers, which we've all had, and they're like, yeah, I'll get to it. Yeah, no worries. And that listing agent is contacting the lender. Does the lender have to tell them where they're at?
Yes, there are.
Anybody? Does the lender have to tell the listing agent what's happening?
No.
No.
Wrong. It tells us right here that unfortunately, buyer obtaining loan, buyer shall probably, hold on. Where am I? Oh, here you go. It's line number 99. Buyer shall keep seller and broker fully informed about the status of buyer's mortgage, loan application, loan approval, and loan processing, and authorizes buyer's mortgage broker, lender, and closing agent to disclose such status and progress and release preliminary and finally executed closing disclosures and settlement statements. So what does that say? They're saying, absolutely, go ahead and talk to my my lender or my mortgage broker or whomever anytime you want to. So that listing agent can then send this contract highlighted, which we have done so, and said, as per the contract, the buyer's already given us the authority to know what's happening. So does it happen that they're like, hey, did they get those W-9s in? I know they needed to do that, blah, 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 whatever. And they say, no, they didn't. Now that listing agent has that correspondence to prove that your buyer is not using diligent effort. Will your buyer lose their money?
Yes.
Only if you can't get them to do it by the deadline.
Absolutely. So the key here is to know that not only is the buyer agreeing to use diligent effort, but that they can lose their deposit if they don't, because they will be in default. So that's the thing we need to share with those buyers who are dragging their feet. Remember, you agreed in the contract to use diligent effort, which means you've got to get things in on time. Otherwise, you can lose your deposit. It is our job as representing the buyer to make sure they're very aware of that, right? And that's a great, for those people who tend to lag, we got to let them know that. Sound good? All right. Yeah.
Sorry, can I ask a quick question? I dealt, and you, I don't know if you remember, with I was representing the seller and a small sale, and but the buyers made all kinds of mistakes. I mean, they broke all the rules. They made a lot of mistakes. But what honestly bothers me is that at the end of the day, the title company that we were working with, they tell you, well, if they don't sign that they release the funds to you, nobody's gonna get that.
So that's a whole nother story. And that's the reality, Maria. Unfortunately, the good thing about a brokerage holding escrow is that if there's an escrow dispute, it is not determined by either side. It is determined by DBPR. That goes to DBPR as an escrow disbursement order, and DBPR takes about 4 to 5 months, but they make a decision based upon the contract, and this is how it goes. No brokerage, really, there's probably 1 or 2 out there, want to hold escrow because of being audited by DBPR. Go figure. So we don't want to hold escrow. We're not going to hold escrow. That's why we have title companies do it. So my recommendation to you is when you are on the list side and you're partnering with different title companies, your first question needs to be, in an escrow dispute, how do you handle that? Because it is very clear here in the contract, and we can move forward, it's further along, but anyway, it's very clear that they say if there is a dispute, we notify the title company has 10 days to go ahead and try to make an arrangement, and if they can't, they're supposed to sign up for arbitration. That's agreed upon by buyer and seller. Unfortunately, the title company is not party to the contract, so they don't actually have to follow that. So even though buyer and seller are agreeing to it, the title company doesn't have to. So they could just, and there are title companies that'll just put it in some other department, send them a letter and say, deal with it yourselves. And if you can't, the money's going to go to Sheets and it's going to get held by the state. That happens.
They want the business of resolving that with their lawyers, and it bothers me because who's going to fight for
There's nothing we can do, Maria. So I would tell you that the more you can make yourself knowledgeable about how people handle, if you know they're working with a title company that does not handle disputes well, then you might want to, for example, on the front page, not put down as much money here, but go ahead and put an additional deposit after inspection or after appraisal. You're welcome to do that. It makes it strong, but you're not risking as much money. So you can be very knowledgeable as the buy side, knowing what kind of title company is holding the money, knowing how they're going to handle an escrow dispute. So you'll know whether you feel comfortable putting more money up front or maybe putting it after you've passed inspection or appraisal or what have you. So those are things that you can do to protect your buyer. But unfortunately, that is out of our hands. Now back to here. Okay, so let's also talk about here. Now, this is crucial, and this has been a problem. Once the buyer has obtained the loan approval, they are supposed to promptly deliver within written notice. They have to tell the seller of that in writing, and they have to do so within the expiration of the loan approval period. Okay, now if they haven't obviously obtained the loan, they send that to them written as well, and then that way they can either waive their contingency or terminate the contract. But what happens if they fail to send that notice. And this falls a lot of times on the buyer's agent. So here you go, you find out you got the loan approval, you forget to tell the listing agent, you didn't put it down, and then within 3 days after the expiration of the loan approval period, you receive a release and cancellation. You think your buyers are gonna be mad?
Yes, they can be, but that is right.
That is right. It was your job to be on top of that.
Yeah.
So this is a key and crucial part. You have got to send written notice, and that could be a text, it could be an email, but it has to be something saying, we've got loan approval, we're good to go. Because if you don't, that seller has 3 days after the loan approval. So if the loan approval period ended the 1st, they have the 2nd, the 3rd, and the 4th, but they can now elect to terminate the contract and move on to another backup offer or whatever they want. Now, does the buyer lose their money?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say so.
Anybody else? No.
No.
Because if they don't tell us, we are assuming that they're waiving that and they're going to continue as if they had gotten the loan approval. So we're assuming they're going to close. So the only time we know they didn't close is if they miss closing, right? So we can't take their deposit because we can cancel the contract. The seller can cancel the contract because they didn't tell us they had loan approval, so they didn't keep us updated. But we can't assume that they would not have closed, right? But how we waited to the closing date and now we knew there was issues and they don't close, now we can keep the deposit and then take the backup offer, right? So you've got to weigh those options when you're talking to your seller. Listen, we have not heard from them. We do not know if they have loan approval. I've been in touch with the lender. It's very shaky. I do not think they have loan approval. They have not come to us with an extension. What do you want to do? They're supposed to close in 3 days. They have a $5,000 deposit. If they don't close, you can keep the $5,000 deposit and take your backup offer. Right? That is being in charge of what the missing pieces of this are. So as the buyer's agent, it is crucial that you put all these deadlines into a calendar and you don't put it on the day they're due, you put it a couple days before, because you need to make sure that you are helping your buyer not either lose the home or lose their deposit. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cam, I bet this is very different than New York, right? Is this scary that they have realtors doing all this stuff? Very scary here. Okay, so yeah, you guys meet Kim Mancini. Yay, hi Kim. She joins us. She was from New York. She was an attorney up in New York, but she's actually worked for WCI for many years as a sales director. So yay, regional director. Okay, so here we go. One last thing that I want to talk about right here. If loan approval has been obtained or deemed to be obtained, and it doesn't close, right? There's 3 reasons that the seller, the buyer would receive their money back, right? It tells you right here. I'm on line 117. So the sellers, number 1, have not met, default or inability to satisfy contingencies of the contract. So they say, the appraiser says the roof has to be changed, or they agree the roof is going to be changed or something like that. Obviously, it's not the buyer's fault, right? So they're not going to get the funds. So then it's the seller's fault. The buyer will get their money back. 2, the properly related conditions of the loan approval have not been met. WDO, something like that. Again, so in that instance, you know, whatever's been agreed upon, if an addendum hasn't been kept up, if they didn't take care of some kind of thing that the inspector said or the appraiser said, those are reasons that the buyer will get their money back because it was the seller's fault. But let's look at number 3. Appraisal of the property obtained by buyer's lender is insufficient to meet the terms of loan approval. Wow. So let's talk about that. Let's say the home is $500,000. They're putting down 20%. That is what? 100 grand, right? Let's say they get an appraisal and it comes back at 480. I'll say 490. If they didn't add an appraisal contingency, can they cancel this contract and get their money back? Based upon appraisal of the property obtained by buyer's lender is insufficient to meet the terms of loan approval. Anybody?
You said they didn't add a contingency, then
Nope, it's just what's here in the contract. Because
No,
it says right here, appraisal of the property obtained by buyer's lender is insufficient to meet the terms of loan approval. And they were getting, they were paying $500,000 for the home and it came in at 490.
no.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anybody?
Isn't that negotiable?
But yes, they could cancel if they want to.
No, because they can still get the loan.
Yes.
They
So
can say that.
remember, the loan is 400,000. They're putting 100 grand down. So the bank is at 490 with the appraisal. They're feeling pretty good, aren't they? Their risk is fabulous. So in this instance, they're not covered under an appraisal contingency because they can still get that loan, can't they?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So if it's FHA or VA, obviously you have to use the addendum and it has an appraisal contingency in it. If you have a conventional loan, my recommendation is always add an appraisal contingency with it, because there's an instance that it would carry. Let's say these people have fabulous credit and they're doing a 1% loan. So they have 500,000, they're doing a 1% loan, they're putting down 5 grand. So if it comes in at 490, that's less than the bank is lending them. The bank is lending them 495. In that instance, they would be covered. But how often does that happen, guys? Right? Question, Jen? You have a question? I can't hear you.
No, Carrie stepped away, so I was just kind of explaining
Okay.
to her that the 490, 100.
Does anybody have a question about that? You guys have no questions. It's amazing. Well, we have passed our time because really, let's be honest, you can never do contracts in an hour. But do we have any questions about anything we've covered? The financing contingency, the COVID addendum?
Oh, I guess.
Carrie, in this part that you were talking about the appraisal, does the lender usually just take into consideration the amount they're gonna lend? Don't they take into consideration the whole, appraisal of the house, the whole value?
Why would they? If they're lending 400,000 and it said there's appraisal for 490, they're feeling pretty good. The money they're risking is 400.
Yes, but
What is
let's
the risk
say that
assessment? They're not worried about the buyer. You got to understand, the bank is worried about their bottom line, and their bottom line is they're lending 400,000. So if it came in at 490, they're good.
Okay.
Now,
I mean,
you
I
could
don't know the
ask a
appraisal.
lender, will you give a denial if the home does not appraise? You have to understand that lenders all have things called overlays. So depending on the bank's rules and guidelines, which may be different than another bank's rules and guidelines, some banks may say, yes, we will give a denial if it doesn't appraise for the total amount. Other banks will say, no, because it appraised for our loan approval amount. So you really need to understand what the bank is looking for. And that's a question you have to ask the bank. But again, if you have an appraisal contingency on every contract, you don't need to worry about it, right? Now, one more thing I want to make sure that we are covering really quickly. In a contract, when DBPR is looking at this contract, they're looking at to make sure that every initial is done. They're looking to make sure, I have to add this on here. DBPR is not going to care about this, but it is against a lot of rules. Over here, when we put ourselves down, right? I am bringing the buyer, and Jen is the listing agent, and I write 3% here. Is that okay?
No.
No.
I'm not part of this contract. I am solely helping as a representative, as a transaction broker to make this work. This is not a place for me to put my commission. If there's a bonus, do I write my bonus here or under additional terms?
No.
No.
No, I don't. Because I might say now, if that was in the MLS, I would do other MLS broker synopsis, and I would include the broker synopsis if I wanted to do that, because it would cover other things, right? You could do that. But really, you don't have to. You could just take a picture, a screenshot, or whatever, upload the MLS broker synopsis as the date of the contract into the dot loop. And if they're not paying the bonus, you simply hand it to the title company and they will pay the bonus, because they see that that offer of compensation was given at the time of contract. So that's why you do not have to incorporate yourself here at all, because you just need to take a screenshot or download the PDF from the broker synopsis stating, and I would highly recommend every time you have a sale, you do that, because I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that on several occasions, we had it where a title suddenly was giving 2.5%, it was supposed to be 3%, or they weren't giving a bonus and they were supposed to do a bonus. Why did that happen? Because they asked the other side, hey, what was the commission? They said, oh, it's 2.5%. Right? And that's what they did it off of. So in that instance, we send them the broker synopsis and we say, per the MLS, which was an agreement, and that's part of the code of ethics, right? Here's one other question, not really related to contracts, but the same kind of topic. If someone says 2% commission, can I negotiate that if I'm a ringed buyer? Can I call the listing agent and say, listen, I want to put in an offer, but I want to get 3%. Can I do that?
You can
Not
do
if
it
it's on the
before
MLS.
property, I think.
Who says you can do it? Maria, you think you can do it?
Before you show the property, I think you're supposed to do that before you.
Anybody else?
Yes, I would say yes.
Okay, no, it's against the code of ethics. That is a code of ethics violation. You are not allowed to negotiate your commission. And the reason is because who are you putting first? Yourself or your buyer?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I was told, yeah. Thinking
You're
about it,
wrong.
yes, but,
Don't ever do it. It's a code of ethics violation. And if you put it in writing to somebody, they could submit that to the board and they could write you up for a code of ethics violation.
even if they have $500 for payment, it's not, what I understood is that you could do it. I've never done it, but as long as you even show the property or anything, you can ask them, would
No.
you know?
You can never, ever, never do it, because if you do, and people do it all the time. So I'm telling you, you can never do it. People do it all the time. The reason is because you're putting yourself, your interests before the interests of the buyer.
Yeah,
Right?
but
You can't do that.
what I'm saying.
Another
So
thing,
when it's
here's
a-
another question. This code of ethics, but we're going to talk about this briefly. You have a buyer. You've showed them a property many times. You've been talking to the listing agent back and forth, and then you find out that they put in an offer with another agent. Can you call the listing agent and say, don't accept that offer?
No.
You cannot be any kind of hindrance to the sale. That is against the code of ethics. If you want to go for procuring cause, what should you have? A signed what?
Buyer's agreement.
Broker buyer agreement, which still can be proven negated if you didn't keep up with your talk with them, if there's any point where they feel like you're not working in their best interest, because they're going to ask the buyers why you chose not to work with you. So you still have to prove it, but you have a real much cleaner shot if you have a broker buyer agreement. If you don't have a broker buyer agreement, that agent didn't do anything against the rules, because an agent must ask, are you in an exclusive relationship with another agent? And only if you have a broker agreement are you in an exclusive relationship with the buyer. You can show the buyer for a year, 2 years, 20 years, it doesn't matter. You're not in an exclusive relationship unless they sign an agreement saying you are. If they are in an exclusive relationship with you, not only are they not allowed to talk to you, they cannot put in an offer with that person if they're in an exclusive relationship with someone else. That is against the code of ethics. So that is why you now have a better footing, not only because of the buyer, but because the other agent broke the code of ethics. Got it?
Carrie, I have a question.
Sure.
I have a situation when it happened yesterday, actually. I was submitting an offer and the listing agent came back with the counter offer saying like, we will accept, let's say 485, or we can accept 475 if the buyer pays you the commission. Can they do that?
If the seller, they can ask. A buyer can say, you can negotiate. If you want to, like, for example, if it doesn't appraise, can both sides say, I'll give a commission? Yes. Can they make you do it? No. So they're saying they would accept 485. I would say they are dancing very closely on that line of code of ethics violations by saying, if you accept less, then we'll say, that is really very sketchy. Can I call it a direct code of ethics violation? It depends. If they said they did this, what the seller said to do, right? This is where it gets ugly, because the seller's not held to the code of ethics, the agent.
In this case, you can't go to the buyer and say, hey, they will accept 475, but you got to pay me commission. I can't do that.
No, So I would contact the listing agent back and say, due to the code of ethics, I certainly cannot submit this second offer. I would mention the code of ethics, because who's the buyer's agent and the listing agent? Is it somebody who's done a lot of business?
I have no idea who she is.
I mean, they may not even be aware about the code of ethics. That's the unfortunate reality of our profession at the moment. But it really, it's a sticky one, because if they said, I'm just doing what the seller asked, they can ask and you could say no, but you don't have to present, because they're changing your commission and that's not allowable, right? They're not allowed to change that commission unless you say yes. So I would contact them back and say, you know, I cannot present the second offer based on the code of ethics. I would say that and not go into it.
Okay, thank you.
That's very tricky. Carrie, in regard to the MLS, just a comment. I mean, I know you said we can add the MLS sheet there in others, but I find that myself to be very confusing, because again, we're not supposed to be part of the contract, and the MLS is full of mistakes. So when I had people ask me to get my buyers sign, you know, that before and things like that, but you find so many errors there that is something that is not comfortable to do. So I think it's always good to be put all the details better in the contract that being signing those MLS sheets is not comfortable.
Remember, Maria, if they have written it as a checkbox and said MLS synopsis, they have incorporated it. That is part of the contract, and then you have to go over it with your buyers. Absolutely, or your sellers. That is the point right there. If they have incorporated it. If it's not incorporated, you don't have to have them sign it, because it means nothing. It's irrelevant. Unless it's actually incorporated into the contract, it is completely irrelevant.
So Carrie, wouldn't you just always do that MLS form or MLS addendum then, just so you're covered?
MLS addendum?
Or Virgo?
No, not really. I would always print it and have it for me, but I personally prefer to make sure that this particular line under personal property included, that I would be filling things out there specifically.
Okay.
Yeah, because there are many other things.
Here's another point. If you just wrote washer and dryer, now ours that were stolen were front loaders. They were beautiful. And we didn't have to replace anything because they put per MLS, but we did because the seller was really nice. But he just put some cheaper top loader, you know, whatever. So I would have said Samsung front loader, you know what I mean? Very specific. So if you just incorporate the MLS and it just says washer and dryer, again, if it was a nice washer and dryer, you might not get that one. So the thing with a contract to remember is it is for clarity. The whole point of a contract is clarity, that all parties involved understand what is going to happen in the time frame it's going to happen. And so the more specific you can be, the better, which is why, God, one more thing, guys, one more thing. And I know we're going way over, and if you guys are okay, I'm okay. But I just want to, this one kills me. Please do not write here, this home is contingent on the house appraising. What does that mean? Appraising for what? You just said it has to be appraised. That means nothing. I see it all day long. It's contingent on the house appraising. What does that mean? Yep, it was appraised. There you go. You have to use the addendums. We have them here. They're written by attorneys. There is an appraisal addendum. And you want to look for F, appraisal contingency, because it's going to call out many more things. Let's take a quick peek and look at the appraisal contingency.
Well, Carrie, since you're talking about appraisal contingency, where it has the price listed that it has to appraise to.
Notice there's two, Crisp and Farbar, by the way, too. Go ahead.
Okay, so the question is, do you have to put a dollar amount in there because you might still be in negotiations, or can you put?
If left blank, purchase price. So I really don't like if left blank, but if that's what you're concerned about, you could leave. I have seen this come with both of these blank all the time, and still they're covered because they both say if left blank at least 10 days prior to closing, if left blank, purchase price.
Okay, thanks.
So you can do that. But in my estimation, you're better off. I would rather write the higher number, even if it came in lower. That way it has to approve of the higher number if you never had that changed, right? You're covered higher. So in my opinion, I don't like the if left blanks, except for one reason. And I will show you. We didn't get into the as is versus far bar, and I know we're way over. Is everybody okay in time, or you guys got to run?
I'm good.
I'm good.
make sure I'm good. Let's see. God knows. Yep, I'm good. Okay, so where was I?
We have to go
With-
out.
What?
We have to go out.
Yeah, well, anybody who wants to leave, go right ahead. I just want to go over one other thing,
No,
which is pretty important. Let me see. Okay. Here's the difference. So up until line 128, closing costs, the as-is and the FAR bar, the residential, are exactly the same. There is no difference. They're all calendar days. They're all time of the essence. They're the finance contingency, exactly the same. No changes. The change in the contract happens right here. This is where, to me, the strength of this contract comes. And I hate the other one because it does not include this. So the other one, as known as the as-is, that people love to use all the time. Here we go, property right to inspection. Buyer shall have, if left blank, right, 15 days, within which to have an inspection. Do they have to have one?
no.
No.
And if during that time they desire, if they determine in their sole discretion, look at this language, that the property is not acceptable for whatever reason, they don't like the fact that it's gray. They don't like the fact that there's a walk-up. They don't like the fact that today the sky is blue. It doesn't matter. They may terminate this contract by giving written notice and get their money back. This is a cancel for any reason clause. And I don't care about, I mean, if I'm working with the buyer, I don't want them to be able to cancel for any reason. Why am I driving around spending my time and my gas and my money, right? For them to cancel for any reason? No, I don't like that for either side. What I love about this contract is right here. We're going to determine at the time of contract, yes, we're going to have an inspection because we plan on closing this home. And if there's a problem, the seller is going to agree to spend a certain amount of money to correct those problems. One for general repairs, one for WDO, and one for closing out of open permits, which, by the way, in the as-is contract is the buyer's problem. The buyer has to find out if there's any issues, and the buyer has to take care of the issues, and the buyer has to pay for it. People don't realize that. They think the as-is is protecting the buyer. Well, not if there's any permit issues, because you just put them out to dry. That is all on the buyer. But here it's not. It's on the seller, right? And you can write a dollar amount. So if you're on the listing side, you can say at the time of listing, you know, there's two different contracts. One has a cancel for any reason clause. The other one, we're going to predetermine how much you feel comfortable with giving if there are problems in inspection for general repair, WDO, or permits. And based upon the condition of the home, you can say, okay, we'll do 500 for general repair, 200 for WDO, 100 for permits, or whatever. You can determine that. And that way, when the inspection happens, which, by the way, they have to give you a copy. If you ask them in writing, they must provide the inspector's summary report. And it has to say, must repair or replace. It cannot say, talk to the seller. Like, what does that mean? Like, these inspection reports, some of them are so stupid. You have to have a conversation. You should look into this. Further information necessary. Like, it's retarded. What are you paying for? It should have to say, must repair or replace. Okay? You get to see that. And you're going to determine based upon that if the seller has to pay any money or take care of the repairs. Now, if I'm representing the buyer, I'm going to bank on the fact that most listing agents don't know this contract. And most listing agents are used to living blanks, which I hate blanks, right? But I would leave a blank here because if it's left blank, it's 1.5% of the purchase price. So just for fun, if that home is $500,000, that's $7,500 for general repairs, $7,500 for WDO, and $7,500 for permits. How cool is that, guys, right? Pretty exciting. So my point here is, I would try as a buyer's agent to use this contract and not get this filled in. Smart, right? Now, let's say you're on the listing side. I'm going to be looking for this and making sure that my seller is aware of their potential risk, because this is risk for them, right? How much money are they willing to pay to fix or give as a credit? That's the question. The other thing is, let's say the repair is the roof and it's $15,000. Can I add all these numbers up?
No.
It's only 7,500 if left blank for general repairs, right? I doubt the roof would be WDO. Okay, now that everyone's clear on that, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
If they send the contract with that blank, do
Mhm.
you send a counter with your numbers in there?
Yeah, if you're a list side, absolutely. You're always going to counter on this. Why would you leave this? You're leaving your seller wide open for that. I mean, unless they're okay with it, but I wouldn't be. Now, you have a seller who says, well, I don't want to pay any money for repairs, so I want an as is. So you're willing to take your home off the market for 7, 10, 15 days and have them cancel for any reason? No. So how about we counter back 0, 0, 0? Can you do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can. You
Can-
can.
But if
Use
you
it.
represent the buyer, then if you represent the buyer, it's 1.5%, and let's say the issues are much bigger than that, aren't you locking yourself in?
No. Thank you for asking that, Irina. The beautiful thing about this is if you go and they have to get estimates, and they have a certain period of time to do so, and then they submit those estimates to you. So let's say it was $7,500 and it's going to be $15,000. They go back to the buyer, they show the estimate. Now the buyer can say, we want to cancel, or seller can say, we'll pay it, or they can say, hey, let's split the difference. So it is negotiable at that point, but at that point, if it goes over, let's say you put 0, 0, 0 and it's $1, they can now cancel the contract and get their money back. So the buyer has all the same protection. The only difference is they actually have to have an inspection, and there actually has to be something wrong with the home. They just can't cancel for any reason. Following me?
Where does it
So then what's the difference between this contract and as-is contract if you still can walk away?
Because the as is, they don't even have to have an inspection. They don't need it. It says right here that they can cancel if they decide in their sole discretion that the property is not acceptable to them. They say, we're going to terminate the contract.
Oh, you have to be an
in the
inspection.
other one? Where
They
does
don't have to have it. Mhm.
And the building permits.
Yeah, and in this one, let's say you're dealing with a property that's in Winter Park, right? Those are old homes, or downtown or whatever. And Dr. Phillips, and people added on a second story, and they never permitted it, or they never closed out permits. If you're in an as-is contract, this is going to be right here. Buyer's inspection shows that there's needed permits, open permits or needed permits. The seller has to give them all plans or any documentation that they had, right? But that's it. Now the buyers has to get the estimates of repairs, and the buyer has to resolve the permit issues. The seller only has to cooperate in the sense of if he has to sign something or give consent of giving documentation, that's it. The seller shall not be required to expend or become obligated to expend any money. So you're not protecting your buyer, because if there's any permit issues, your buyer has to find them, your buyer has to take care of them, and your buyer has to pay for them, not the seller. Can you cancel? Sure. But now it's a cancel for any reason clause. That's all you're doing, right? Whereas in the other one, the residential, the seller has to take care of it. The seller has to go to the county and try to take care of it. The seller has to pay for it unless it goes above the amount that you agreed upon. And now we have a conversation.
Okay, so I've got a question. On MLS, it usually says submit all offers on FARBAR as is.
I hate it.
And let's say you want to do this one. Is there a problem?
You have to call the listing agent and ask. So my recommendation is you ask, out of curiosity, why do the sellers want the as-is contract? And I guarantee you, the sellers were never given the option. They don't even know there's two contracts. It's the agents who don't want to use the residential contract because they don't know it. That's what it is.
Okay.
Because if you're representing a seller, which one is going to represent the seller better?
The FARBAR, the residential contract.
And in my opinion, if you're representing a buyer, which one's going to represent the buyer better?
Well, yes, but it still comes back to the listing agent who has the instructions of which contract to use.
Well, it's not supposed to, right? It's supposed to be the seller, because the listing agent doesn't get to determine that. But unfortunately, oftentimes it does. So that's why you call the seller, the listing agent, you say, may I ask why the seller is requesting an as-is? If they can't answer that question, you can say, so would you please ask the seller if they'd be willing to accept a residential contract? We don't know that they're going to ask the seller, right? That's where code of ethics gets really ugly, because they could say they talked to the seller or whatever. We don't know, but they're not supposed to make any decisions when it comes to the transaction, because they're not in the transaction. It's the buyer and the seller. not the agents. So many times these agents try to represent the seller. They don't even talk to the seller, right? They're making decisions for the seller. That's not how it works. That's not real estate. Now you're pretending to have power of attorney, which again is a felony, 3rd degree. So this is where it gets sticky and ugly. Now, let me show you one other thing. And this is my favorite part of this contract.
Okay, one more question on the same
Sure.
subject. So if they did the inspection and the buyer decides to walk away, there is no amount of days, like the as is has 15 days inspection. How about this contract?
Yeah, you have an inspection period. You have a certain amount of days that you have to get this to them. But let's say you are representing the buyer, you had 7 days, you did the inspection, and you sent them the report within 7 days. Now they don't have to answer you by the 7th day, right? Now you put that in, and now you have the negotiation period. So there is no time frame necessarily on that, because other than the fact that they have a certain amount of time that it's going to take them to get repairs and to notify you. So that part there is, but it's not like you have to cancel, otherwise you get your money back, right? Now they have to go get the repairs, come back to you with the money. So it's the same thing. It's just that you predetermined the amount the seller's willing to pay. And if something comes up that's much bigger, like polybutylene piping, God help us, right? Your buyer's covered. They can back out and get their money back. It's fine. Or the seller can say, we'll do it.
By when? By the time when they present the inspection report and...
Nope. By the time the seller comes back and says, this is what it's going to cost and this is what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, so as long as you on the buy side have gotten that information in by the inspection period, you're covered, right? Because
There's no inspection period on this agreement.
Yeah, there is. All of them have it.
And here you have to do an inspection.
You have to do an inspection.
So if the seller puts 0,
You're up there. There you go. Right here, line 261, Irina, inspection period. Buyers will have blank, if left blank, 15 days to do their inspection period. But they must get it inspected, and they must use a licensed inspector in that area. So you can't use your brother who is a handyman, and he can't tell you that the roof is leaking. What happens in the as is, let's be honest, people will go in, and these inspectors, they kill me. That's why I hate when buyers go in there when the inspector's there, because they just talk and want to show you their knowledge, and half the time they're wrong, and they're going to tell you all these things that are wrong, scare the heck out of the buyers. And then the listing agent is going to come back and say, oh my God, it's going to take $20,000 to get this house up. And now the seller's going, I paid $20,000 or what? So what are you doing? You're going out of contract. Right? This is not like that. This is saying you actually have to have an inspection. You have to give us the inspection. We have to request it in writing if they don't. And they have to be a licensed inspector. So see, seller upon written notice will request a copy of the portion of the professional inspector's written report dealing with such items. Now, this is what I love. Now, this is the one thing that you need to be very clear. And as a listing agent, it's the best. So it tells you what must the property be like. So it has to be free of leaks, water damage, structural damage, the ceiling and the roof, the exterior walls, windows, doors, they all have to be functioning properly, right? Also the pool equipment, any non-leased major appliances, cooling, heating, mechanical, electrical, sprinklers, septic, plumbing, I mean, all your major things, they have to be maintained in working condition. So they have to be working at that time and at the time they close, right? Torn screens, fog, windows, missing roof tiles or shingles must be repaired or replaced because they're obviously not working condition. The seller is not required, and this is my favorite part, to replace or repair cosmetic conditions. So here they're going to define what a cosmetic condition is. Now, this is not all of them, but this is a lot of them. So working condition means it has to be operating in the manner which the item was designated to operate. Cosmetic means aesthetic imperfections. That does not affect working conditions. So here you go. Pitted marcite, tears, worn spots, discoloration of floor coverings, wallpapers, window treatments, nail holes. How many times we get nail holes? Scrapes, scratches, dents, chips, or caulking. We hear caulking all the time. Caulking in ceiling, walls, floor tile, tiles, fixtures or mirrors, minor cracks in walls, minor cracks in floor tiles, How many times you say, oh, there's a crack in the tile, it must be a structural issue? No, you're in Florida, and if you don't have a crack, it's a miracle, okay? Cracks in driveways all the time, windows, sidewalks, pool decks, garage, and patio floors. These are cosmetic. Cracked roof tiles or curling worn shingles, my favorite, limited roof life, are not considered defects. The seller must not repair or replace as long as there's no leaks and it has no structural damage. So therefore, if you look at half of the things, probably more like 90% of the things you get from these inspectors are all these stupid cosmetic things. So I had a situation with an agent who was like, I hate that. I am always as is, and finally she said, oh, fine, I'll offer to the seller. Of course, the seller picked the residential, got into contract with the residential contract. Someone gave her an offer on an as is. She said, unfortunately, the seller's only accepting on the residential contract. Came back, put it on a residential contract. Had the inspection, gave the report. Everything on that report that she wanted done was all cosmetic. She was able to send the report back to the agent and with this page and say, wow, thank you for sharing with me all of the items that the buyer will plan to fix after they move in. But obviously, due to the contract that buyer and seller have agreed upon, the fact that these are all cosmetic conditions, we'll be expecting you to close. It was really fun. She liked it.
So when you're doing a listening consultation, you recommend, can we recommend that we only accept this contract in the MLS?
Never recommend.
Well, not recommend, but you
Ask
explain to them the,
Explain them the two. There are two contracts that are used in the state of Florida, typically, especially in Central Florida, the as-is contract and the residential. The as-is contract has a cancel for any reason clause. So they have 7, 10, 14 days. The buyer can choose for any reason that they want to cancel. The residential contract doesn't. They have to have an inspection. And if there's an inspection, we can predetermine how much you're willing to pay for general repairs, WDO, and open permits. And that way, if it comes up that it costs more, now we can get into a negotiation. You know, are you willing to pay it? Are they willing to pay it? You're going to split the difference, or they can cancel and get their money back. But at least we're working off of a contract of something we've already agreed to do. I will guarantee you, how many sellers you think are going to say as is?
none. So
No.
we can then add that to the remarks that we're only accepting this.
Yep, not we. Seller is
Yeah,
requesting.
cool.
It usually said as is because they think they're not going to have to pay anything. But if you explain that, you know.
Maria, the as is, agents are using it. I guarantee you, ask any of those agents why the seller chose it. They cannot answer it because the seller wasn't even asked.
No,
I mean, let's be
exactly.
honest. I'm not going to ask you guys because I know each and every one of you are asking your sellers, but I guarantee that there's a lot of agents out there who aren't. And that's the problem. It's not for the agent to decide. It's for the seller. Is it our
Yeah,
house?
exactly.
No.
So,
Right? It's the sellers. So the only time I would recommend personally, if I had a buyer and we were going to put in an offer and the house had a very old roof, but it seemed to be working fine, I would not use this one unless they were okay with that, because the inspection could come back 0 roof life, and that's cosmetic, right? So if you think you want to negotiate for roof, but based on roof life, you'd be better off in an as-is contract, because this one clearly states that roof life is cosmetic.
So now, do you think that putting that in the remarks that you're only accepting that contract would deter buyers?
Question is, this is a seller's choice to decide that, not yours. And why would it detract a buyer? Because buyers don't know the difference. The question you're really asking me, do you think there's other agents who won't want to put in an offer?
Yeah.
Probably. It could happen.
Okay.
It could happen. But if you have a home that's priced right and it's going to move, you know, you'd be fine. Now, you could also say, let's say you didn't put that in, but they gave you an as-is contract. You can counter on a residential contract,
Sweet.
right? I mean, we do that all the time. All right, any questions, guys? I know we went way over, which I should have just booked 2 hours because it's contracts, and I didn't get the whole thing. Another thing I want to share, compliance-wise. Again, if we say there's certain addendums attached, they need to be attached and they need to be signed. right? That is for compliance. Now, one other thing I want to show you for compliance is on a listing agreement. This is something that I'm having a lot of issues with. So I want to make sure everybody, not to lease listing folder, no. Hello? Okay, it's a little slow. Sorry. Okay. Exclusive right to sell. Okay, here it is. When you're doing a listing agreement, there's a couple things we need to go over just real quick. We want to make sure, obviously, that we're filling it all in. This personal property, that is where we're saying, do they have a Ring doorbell? Is there a chandelier? Are they okay with giving those beautiful custom drapes, right? If it is currently occupied by a tenant, we better have that lease so that we can have it ready when we're in contract, right? Can we leave this price open in an exclusive right to sell listing agreement and have a contract?
No.
We cannot. That needs to be filled in. Absolutely. So that can never be, can it be a variable? No. It has to be a specific number. Can we put under additional terms, if after 2 weeks we have not had X amount of showings and X amount of offers, we will drop the price to $5,000, whatever. Can we do that?
Yes.
All day
Yeah.
long. Should we do that? Absolutely. But
Yes.
the place to put it is not up here. Okay, this has got to be a specific price to start. We can change it, we can modify it. That's not a problem, but we can't put anything, either leave it open or have some kind of a range. If the home is 500,000, are we going to make it FHA?
No.
The FHA limit's like 327 or something. So if it's 500,000, do you think you're going to get an FHA offer on this?
No.
So what's the problem if we put it for FHA? Again, we're just adding to the problem of the MLS, that it's bad information. And if people are searching by FHA allowable and they submit that home, I mean, let's be honest, there's agents out there who don't understand FHA limits or any of that stuff. Oh, great, we can go 3.5% down to 500,000. No, but they don't know, right? So just be aware and cognizant. If the home is a certain price point, you're not going to make it FHA because no one's going to buy it FHA. VA could go at any price, right? So this is the important thing here. Oh, by the way, if the seller does not check either of these to display the internet, the street address, or to put it on the internet, if they don't check those, do we need to initial this?
Yes. No.
They're initialing to say that they want to elect these things. If they're not making an election, they don't need to initial it. Is it a big deal if they initial and there's no election? No, but I just want you to understand the reason that those initials are there is in case they elect that, right? Why would they not want to put the street address? Maybe they're a celebrity, maybe they're a cop, something like that. If they don't want to put it on the internet, well, we have a big problem, don't we? Because we're not going to do much while selling it, but we can certainly still put it on the MLS, but then we can't allow syndication, but we're still in compliance with the MLS. So you still could do that. Question?
It's just that the program asked them to initial, if I'm not mistaken. It's always like that, but
The initials are there in case they elect that, right? If you don't put an initial there and they elect that, they have to sign that they're electing that. But it's not a problem if you have them sign it and there's no election. I just want you to understand what they're there for. Doesn't matter. Obviously, the lockbox. Withhold verbal offers. Do you think we should withhold verbal offers?
no.
Yes, all day long. Why do we want to tell them someone's going to put in an offer for full price and then the offer never comes? We don't want to do that. Plus, people will say, oh, yeah, we're going to put in this offer. Will they take this? And then you ask them. I mean, first of all, it's not $1 million listing. And second of all, if you do that, then they come in lower. That's just their way to get you to go lower on the price. So no, please put your offer in writing. The seller is not accepting verbal offers. That's why we select that one, right? Now, withhold all offers once seller accepts a sale. Do we want to do that? Anybody? Nobody has an opinion? Anybody? Okay, I'm going to share with you my opinion. Heck no, we do not want to withhold all offers because in this market especially, we want to take backup offers. You can't take backup offers if you're withholding that. So when you're in the MLS and you're filling out that status sheet and they ask, are you accepting backup offers? Always put yes, which means that here you cannot check that, right? Because if you checked this, we're not taking backup offers. Good?
It depends who you're dealing with. Sometimes with some difficult sellers, it's better to check that box.
Irina, I hear you. But in general, yes, exactly. We all deal with some special ones. Yeah, and you know what? You're the agent. You're the expert. You're the one dealing with it. So you know if you chose to do that, you did it for a reason. And we're going to make sure that we select not taking backup offers, right? For sure. But in general, I want everybody to be aware it's always good not to check that because typically 9 out of 10 times we want backup offers. All right, here. Number 72 and 74, seller does not authorize automated estimate of market value. What is that about? Anybody?
It's about like Zillow estimates and stuff.
Ding, ding, ding. Good job, Dexter. So what do we select here? What do we check? Do we authorize it? Do we not authorize it? Anybody? Everybody still there? Hello?
Doesn't really matter if you check it or not check it. Zillow does it whatever they want.
No, it does withhold it if it puts it, they won't display it right on the top if you say withhold. That's a checkbox that we put into the MLS that either we allow the AVM or we don't allow the AVM. But I would tell you on that is look, like if we're doing a power sellers report, right? What are we doing? We're checking the home on Zillow, Trulia, Realtor.com, Redfin, whatever. If the property value on one or more of those sites, especially Zillow, is more than or the same or more than we're going to put it as the asking, all day long I want to show it. Yeah. If Zillow says it's worth 520 and we're asking 500, that's awesome. We love that. If Zillow says it's worth 450 and we're asking 500, we don't like that. So I would suggest before you randomly always check it, check the Zillows, the Redfins, the Realtor.coms because it could help us in some cases. Authorizing third parties to write comments or reviews, honestly, unless you're representing some kind of crack house or something, I really don't think that's an issue. But sometimes you do have private sellers and they don't want people talking. Maybe they saw that it's a sports person's home or something like that. In that case, I would say don't allow it. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. Here we go. This one, believe it or not, still makes me laugh. Okay, what number typically are we going to put under A? Compensation. The seller will compensate broker. How much are we going to put there? Anybody?
6.
Anybody think different?
Yeah, you can put
7.
20, right? No.
Yeah.
But yes, you guys are correct. It is the total amount. Often I see 3% here, and then I see 333. You know what that means? We're not getting paid any money. So this has to be the total amount that they're paying, and this is what we're giving to the buy side, right? So always remember, number 8 is the total amount. It has to be bigger than the amount we're offering here. Otherwise, we're not getting paid any money, okay? Now, another thing here. This is a fun one. So let's say 6%. Let's say we're going to give 3%. I see people put 3% here for single agent. They put 3% here for transaction broker, and they put 0 or 1 for no relationship, brokerage relationship. Can I ask, I know some of you guys do this. Why do you do it?
I don't do it.
Irina, you guys have done that before, right?
Doesn't make sense.
No, I always do 3% for all.
Oh, you do? Oh, I love you. Okay, anybody do that here? I know a lot of people in our offices still do it. Maybe no one on the call. All right, the reason people do it is because a lot of times, especially, okay, anyone from Miami here? Okay. Maybe we'll have an agent from Miami who's calling to say, I'm going to send my customer up. And so we don't want to pay them to represent their customer to do all the work and they get paid the same. That's the idea. That's what people are thinking. It doesn't work like that. So in the state of Florida, we're all soon to be what?
Transaction brokers.
Thank you, Irina. Gold star. Transaction brokers. If we're not a transaction broker, upon the first meeting, we must get a signed disclosure from the customer saying that we're either single agency or no brokerage relationship, right? And then we have to keep that on file. And DBPR is going to audit that too. We don't have to worry about it because we're always transaction brokers, which is why I don't want you guys using the word client, because client infers fiduciary. And we are not fiduciary, then we'd be single agents. We are all customers in the state of Florida because we're transaction brokers, okay? And that's why you have to be very careful in words of how you're saying what you're doing for your customers, because as soon as you cross the line and make it that you're representing them solely, you're changing our brokerage relationship. So don't do that, because that's a big violation right there. So we're transaction brokers. In the case that somebody was a no relationship broker, how would we know that to pay them less amount? Anybody know? Per the rules of 475, if you are a relationship other than transaction brokerage and you must have a signed disclosure, at the time of offer, you must submit that signed disclosure to the listing agent. In the many, many years that I've been doing this, I have received one. And it was the guy who didn't know what the heck he was doing. So he actually put one here. He submitted no brokerage relationship. He wrote 3 on the contract, and he was giving away almost all of the money to the buyer because it was his family, which he didn't have because it was 1%. At the end of the day, we did what was right for the seller to make sure it closed. We gave the 3%, but did we have to? No, because he was no brokerage relationship. But the reality is, it never happens. We don't know someone's brokerage relationship unless they submit to us a signed disclosure of such. And that never happens. So in my opinion, if you write anything less than what you're giving the other sides, you're just limiting exposure. And mostly because people don't even understand what it means.
Harry, and my understanding is, I always put the same because I learned earlier years ago that it doesn't matter. They still, if somebody's not necessarily in a relationship, supposedly they can, they present the offer. But
it has to do with presenting the offer, Maria. If I'm a no brokerage relationship and I'm representing Dexter and he signs no brokerage relationship and I put in an offer, legally I'm supposed to put in the non-disclosure, this disclosure where he says we're no brokerage relationship. And then I would get paid at the 1%. That's how that's supposed to work.
Yes,
but nobody does that is the problem.
What many agents out there think is that, oh, I'm doing all the work. Not necessarily. That doesn't mean necessarily that you're doing all the work.
It doesn't even matter whether you are or not. It has nothing to do with broker relationship. Okay, so back to here, conditional termination. Okay, guys, I'm going to be really clear here. You see, people a lot of times will write 0% cancellation fee here. What is the point of that cancellation fee? Anybody know? Nobody knows. Come on, you guys know. What is it supposed to cover?
To protect your marketing expenses.
Thank you, Irina. Right. If you had video, Matterport, pictures, all those things, that's what that's for. But if somebody is going to cancel, right, there's a conditional termination that you can't approve. I have to approve, which, by the way, I don't like to approve. And if I decide to allow them to conditionally terminate, that means that no one else can list it anyway to the end of the listing period, right? Because they're still in a relationship with us. So if they were to sell it, even for sale by owner, they still owe us our commission. Because if the property transfers holding to anyone, we get a commission through the end of our listing period. The other thing is, and this is important, seller must sign a withdrawal agreement, reimburse broker for all direct expenses incurred in marketing the property. Guys, every property, the least amount we spend on every property, and we spend much more, is $1,500. So we charge a flat fee here of $1,500 to withdraw it conditionally. Okay, so if we're, and whatever you put here, so if we're ever going to agree to let somebody withdraw their listing, they're withdrawing it conditionally, never unconditional. There's no language in here about unconditional. If they heard that, they heard it from another agent. And because unconditional means that someone else can list it. We're not going to do that. We just pay thousands of dollars to put their home all over the world. So a buyer's going to come from our marketing and someone else is going to get paid. We're not going to do that. That's why we don't do it. But you have to let them know it's $1,500 fee for the direct expenses, and it really doesn't even cover everything. Okay, everybody clear on that? Yay!
So until the actual listing agreement expires, even if they sign a cancellation form, they can't sell it?
Nope. Because it's an unconditional, it's not an unconditional, it's a conditional withdrawal. So it's out of the MLS. You might as well go on temporarily off market, to be honest, because it's out of the MLS. But if anybody else, no one can list it. Can't be listed. And if anybody sells it, even themselves, they owe us a commission up to the date the listing expires. Mhm.
Harry, quick question. So you're saying that you charge $1,500, but that doesn't include what we, does that include us in any way? Because
Nope. That's what this is for. That's your cancellation fee right here. That's for you.
that's
That's to cover your expenses. Mhm. The $1,500, guys, $1,500 is what we charge an agent to list their own home. It doesn't cover anything. We spend so much more than $1,500. So that's what I'm saying. That's the base fee, okay? Now, one other thing that's really important here. We know that if we've sent this in .loop, they receive a copy, right? Because it gives them the opportunity to download it if they want to at the end of signing. But let's say you didn't sign it. I didn't sign it. They're not getting an executed copy, are they? So this language here that says seller and broker acknowledge and agree all terms and covenants contained in this listing agreement shall remain in full force and effect as of the date of the listing agreement is fully executed. That is because, remember, we don't want to use the waiver. So this date, if we're listing it today, but we don't want it to go on the MLS till April 1st, we're going to write April 1st here. Because we have this language in here, no one else can come and say, oh, we're going to list your property, because as long as we all sign it today and they get a copy today, we are legally in an agreement. But if they don't receive a signed copy, because I didn't sign it or you didn't sign it, we are not in agreement. Does that make sense? So I want everybody to be very cautious. Number one, I give everybody the authority to write your own names here, right on the bottom. I will initial next to you, not because I have to, because it says broker or sales associate. I initial to let you know I looked at it. But it is not important that they get the one that I signed. It's important they get the one you signed, because you are my representative and now they have a listing agreement with us. The only place I have to sign is under dispute resolution. And that means that we're agreeing to arbitrate. Well, why wouldn't I, right? So if they get one that I'm not signed, okay, so I didn't agree to arbitrate. It doesn't matter. You still have an executed listing agreement. I will always go back in and sign everything. We'll send another copy saying we're so excited for working with us. But that is for, technicalities. It has nothing to do with having an actual executed agreement. So it is crucial that you sign this before you send it to them, and put in here the date and that you're emailing it. Right? Because it's coming from .loop. Because that's one thing, I'm going back to all these listing agreements and I'm adding this in because it's very important the seller understands they're in a contract with us. So for requirements in terms of DBPR, this is crucial, right? They need to understand this is executed. Could we go back and prove it in .loop? Yeah, unless you didn't sign it, right? Because then they never got it unless we sent it. Everybody clear on that? No, crickets. Everybody clear?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, any questions about anything else?
I have a question.
Sure.
Are closings still happening? I have a closing on Friday and everything is on lockdown.
So this is what we're waiting to hear, and I'm waiting to hear something from our leadership team. I will share with you that a few days ago, I read from DBPR, Florida Realtors actually put it out, that Governor DeSantis said that real estate was an essential business, okay?
Nice.
Now, can the county supersede that? Maybe, we don't know. So I yesterday read through their entire filing on what they're putting through starting tomorrow at 11 p.m. And it did mention real estate. It wasn't as clear, but it does say real estate. So we're waiting for some clarity on that. But I will tell you, to my knowledge, there's still many companies that are functioning.
Okay, thank you.
And even if we have to stay at home in our company, we are set to work from home. So even if that order does not include real estate for whatever reason, we are still working. We are still going to be functioning, and which is why it's important, guys, that you have direct deposit to make sure you get paid, because if we have to send checks and all that, it could be very delayed, right? Because if we're working from home and handling all this, it's much easier to do it if you are direct deposit. So if you have not set up direct deposit, please do so.
What about electronic notaries? Are they approved in Florida? Is it happening?
Yes, it's approved. It's been approved, I think, about 2 months now. It is happening. I don't know. I haven't heard anything unsuccessful about it. I know Martha had a closing. Phil has done many. Phil's approved, Phil Logus. So it is definitely happening. And I think that's something that will help keep us, definitely doing business if for whatever reason they deem us to be non-essential. But I would be surprised if we were deemed non-essential. But as a company, we could say that we're going to work from home. But it doesn't mean we're closing our doors. We have no intentions of closing our doors at all.
Okay. So I guess it just depends on the title company, right?
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely. So check with your title company. Absolutely. But you will be hearing some kind of correspondence from us during the day in recognition of that new order of how we will intend to proceed. So there'll be clarity for you guys. Okay. I just can't speak for the company because the leadership team is looking into it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Sure. All right. Well, guys, it's been fun. This hasn't been as painful as I thought because typically it's like, is anybody there? Hello. That's why I don't like Zoom. But it's been good. So what do you guys want me to train on next week? Because I was putting my training together. Do you want me to do presentation suite? I did an active pipe yesterday.
Oh, yeah.
Presentation suite.
Presentation suite.
Okay, so I'll do that on Wednesday. I was going to do that Wednesday anyway. What do you guys want me to do on Tuesday? Any requests?
Active pipe. I've been missing.
What?
Active pipe.
You guys want me to do active pipe again?
Yes.
So was there something scheduled for this afternoon again as well? Or no?
Not by me. Marketing could be doing something.
I thought there was something at 2:00. So.
Could be marketing. Marketing
Okay.
a lot of Zooms. But I'm trying to keep my Zoom training at the same time, 10 on Tuesday, 10 on Wednesday, to try to keep consistency. By the way, I recorded this. I may not do anything with it because you know how I feel about my recordings. But in case somebody else wants to watch it, I do have it. And so I don't know what I'll do with it all. I'll see.
Can you send it to us at least, the ones that...
If you guys want to watch it again, you participated, but you're more than welcome to. Yeah. You already saw it, so we're good. Yeah, I'm happy to send it to you if you want to. Okay, well, guys, thanks so much. I hope everyone is staying safe, everyone's family as well. If there's anything we can do on our side, we are here for you. Like I said, we are a strong company. We have no worries about anything. We know whatever happens, we will be able to respond. So keep doing what you're doing. You guys are amazing. And anything you need, give me a holler.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye, guys.
Bye.
Question, Carrie, to you?
Bye.
Well, I don't want to keep anybody, but
I have a question too.
Oh, you have a question? Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Maria.
No, I was in pretty much in the whole thing, but I missed a few things because of phone calls and stuff. But I had a case that somebody called me, an ex-customer of mine, that they had somewhere else a situation. So I wanted to know the procedure. I know it's not happening to me, but I want to learn, so they said we're supposed to close on a house, and now we are not even going to be able to move because of work. They're in the military, for example. So they are actually. So they said, we don't really know if we want to close on this because it might not be convenient. So what is the process that I should follow if I'm representing a customer like that? Let's say that they already got the approval letter. So we're 15 days or 10 days to close or something. What can we do? I know there's a new addendum, but what will be the process?
Yeah, I would definitely use the COVID addendum. Maria, that's right here. And if they need an extension in terms of timing, if they need an extension, are they approved, you said already? They have a loan approval.
Yes, these people that have it. This is not my case, but it's their case. But they were saying, what do we do? Actually, this is a case happening in another state, and they called me, and I said,
well, remember, if you're not involved, never give advice.
Yes, that's what I told them.
But for you, if it was you and you had an approval, you could extend the closing with the COVID addendum. And on the bottom, it clearly states that if for whatever reason they cannot get the loan because either the terms of the condition or the loan approval expires or the lender just refuses to fund, they will get their money back. That's why you want to use the COVID addendum. But again, do not give anybody any advice if you're not in part of that sale.
Yes, that's what I did. I told them, look, I don't even know how the contracts look over there. The best thing you can do is to talk to this. But I wanted to ask it in case, for me to learn. And another thing is that, what about if it's not convenient for them to buy the home anymore? Because in that case, they are
not convenient for them. They're not covered by the contract for not convenient. There is no not convenient. If it's not a loan approval, if they're not within a cancellation or contingency period, and even if they are within a contingency period, but they're not, they still can get the loan. They just don't want to. If they cancel, they're going to lose their money. That's how it's going to go.
Yeah, so basically, yeah, that's what I've been thinking. But in a situation like this, that is unprecedented, that then you're like, most people, like, I think.
But again, remember, a contract will supersede it. So the point of the COVID addendum is to say, if in case you cannot close due to circumstances that have to do with COVID, that's one thing. But if you cannot close because you don't want to, doesn't matter.
Yeah, if you're in breach of contract.
Right.
Oh,
Anything, Dexter?
Yeah, the deal we've been talking about,
Yep.
based on this training, furniture is in the wrong place.
Okay.
If they decide to go through with it, what do I need to do? Do I send a new contract?
Where is the furniture?
In the
Additional terms or something?
no, it's on the first page.
Okay. Did you say, well, how many, did you put like full furnishing instead of?
It says,
Who you're going to want to talk to in that sense is Maria. And the reason is it's because most lenders will have a problem with that.
yeah, she told me that, but she didn't want it changed until.
So if this continues, I would rewrite the first page, add that in an addendum saying it's being conveyed at no cost with no value.
Okay.
Okay. You. All right, guys, I'm going to jump on. The company keeps calling me, so I'm probably missing something. Have a great day. And
thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.